everyone. Welcome to the Comic Zone. As usual, I'm your host, Chriz, aka The Mole, and joining me is a special guest this month, the nexus of the world, Bass.
Yes, I am special. I'm the nexus. That's me. Exactly.
And today we're going to discuss events in comics, the good, the bad, and stuff like that. So, first of all, let's talk about what the events usually are and how we feel about them. What do you feel about events right now?
Well, why don't you go first?
Personally, I don't like them that much. Because nowadays it just seems like an excuse for some big shock and awe story that makes almost no sense.
Sure. Yeah.
By the way, it turns out... sorry.
When you talk about events, what exactly do you mean?
I mean stuff like the Secret Invasion or whatever it was and stuff, or Blackest Night and stuff like that.
Sure. So we're talking probably about limited series that involve the entire sort of universe.
The ones Marvel and DC bill as this year's big event.
That's what I presumed. I just wanted to make sure that we're both exact same thing.
And some of them are stupid, like, oh, by the way, you know everything you've read in the comics, yeah? Yeah, it turns out a Skrull did that. It's like, what? Yeah, Skrull was perfectly, basically pretending to be all these characters you've liked, and did it so perfectly that even you were fooled, haha. It's like, fuck off! I don't care about this event enough to justify what you've done to all this shit.
I remember just particularly with Secret Invasion. My friend, who's a colorist, she colors Secret Invasion. Laura. I was staying at her house, and my dad is an architect, and he would often stay up till 4 a.m. working, and I would be used to staying up, keeping someone company while they're working. So I would stay up till like 4 a.m. with her, keeping her company. I only found out afterwards that she was being polite, and she actually preferred working alone. And so there I was, exhausted, trying to keep her entertained, right? When in fact I wanted to go to sleep, and she wanted me to leave, but no, we were both being too polite to tell the other one we don't need to listen. But what was fun about it was, she'd be coloring Secret Invasion, and I'd be making sort of like, well, why don't the Skrulls work like this? Why don't the Skrulls work like that? And so, the issues hadn't come out. I knew it was going on because I was watching her color the thing. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't get why they're doing it. And so as she's doing it, you're watching the thing happen. There's no speech bubbles or anything and things like that. And you're like going, this doesn't really work, does it? And of course for her it's a pain in the ass because she has to color so many characters. It was funny, she's always going, I'll never do another crossover again. And then, you hear she signed up to do the next big Marvel crossover because she's an excellent colorist. And she loves, the artists and she enjoys doing it. But, it's just funny, because you have these big events and, it doesn't work. And people, as they work on them, kind of go, well, there's a lot of resources being spent on these things. And they're as close as you can to comic books, they're big budget because they require so much time from the artists to do anything. And you're sitting there and you're kind of going, this doesn't really work at a story level, let alone, by the time you get to the artwork, the story should be tighter, and the story isn't tight enough. And it was really profound when, I don't say the story just to name drop, but I say this because it was really profound because I literally had nothing to do other than talk about what she was coloring. And so as I was talking about it, I was unraveling it more and more and really starting to look at how these events work and where their failures are and so on. And I would agree with you. I think most events, I'm trying to think of a good event. I can't. I'm really trying to think of one that was actually wonderful. Or one that I would want to read a second time, and I can't think of one.
For me, my favourite event was probably Secret Wars, the first one, because
in 1985.
Yeah, you got some great team ups from it and stuff like that. It also made kind of sense in that a mystical being was basically playing chess with good guys v evil for the fate of the galaxy. But at the same time, they mentioned like afterwards, most people's recollection of it was going to be wiped and stuff. So you knew it was going to wreck on itself. It was a standalone thing. And you still got some stuff come out of it, like the black suit for Spider-Man, stuff like that. It wasn't like my worst one of all time.
I think, now that I think about it, the only one I can think of that I would actually reread now, because I think it would be fun, is the Infinity Gauntlet. I never read Secret War. I don't think I ever read it. If I did, I was very young and I can't remember it. But Secret War, not Secret War, the Infinity Gauntlet, I thought was actually quite good, right? That was interesting. I think that was pretty good. But if I recall, the Secret War and the Infinity Gauntlet were written by the same man, Jim Shooter, right?
It may have been.
He wrote both of them. And that might explain why they worked, because the guy writing them is the guy who got why they worked. He's the one who wanted to do these big sort of epic stories that couldn't be contained in a single title. The thing is that we have a lot of these events, right? We keep getting them again and again. So why? Well, because they sell. Right? People buy them. It's like, well, why do people buy them? Well, they like them. It's like, well, why do they like them? And if you sit down and you just talk and let people talk who work in the comics industry, particularly editors, you very quickly realize they don't know how to keep an audience. They just don't know why anyone buys their comics. They don't know what it is. So when the comics community buys comics, they just do more of that because they have no idea why that one's selling and the others aren't. Similarly, and if you look at TV and film, it's the same. This is not me just bashing comics, This is the same, film, TV, music, anything like that, because the editors and the executives and so on, they're not people who understand why these things sell. They don't get it. And so they keep producing the same stuff, and they're terrified that if they stop producing this stuff, the audience will disappear, and they won't be able to get them back. Yeah. I once asked an editor why they didn't do comics a bit more like TV seasons, where they release, like, say, one a week for a couple of months, then take a break, and then release, for like 6 months, 8 months, and then bring it back. Because you get that whole, hey, the comic's about to come back and all that stuff. And he went, well, because we don't know if they'll be in the comic shops by the time the second season rolls around.
Did he say to you, that's a brilliant idea, Bass, thank you, and that's why Ultimate Hulk vs. Wolverine got delayed?
No. This was well after. This was like during the delay of Hulk Wolverine. Only I would love to be able to take the credit for that. But man, that was pathetic, that delay. But the thing is, like, when he says, like, we don't know when they're going to be back, that tells you everything. That says they have no idea how to create an audience. If you take a look at, say, on the other hand, Magic the Gathering, the card game?
Yep, the one that's getting a movie now.
It might be. Well, it's in development. That probably means it will not get made. It might, if it will, it's like 3 years down the road before they even start coming up with a timetable for how it's going to get made.
I'm gonna say it's likely it will get made, only because, like you were mentioning with the events where they don't know how to keep an audience, they just look at, okay, this sells, let's do that. Magic the Gathering is now being looked at because it's like fantasy stuff. At the time the Hobbit's now being made.
Absolutely. That's why they bought the rights to it. What's happened is Fox have clearly made an offer for the property long before they know what they're going to do with it, so that no one else gets the property. They're trying to get it first, you see? And once they've got it, because they need stuff to compete with Disney. Disney owns everything now. Disney owns Star Wars, it owns Marvel, it owns all the princesses. Like, it has a total whole monopoly on this kind of place. So they need new franchises. Fox doesn't have Star Wars anymore, you see. They need something new. Magic is a possibility, but it might not get anywhere. For all we know, Wizards of the Coast might say no, because Wizards of the Coast are very big on making sure they don't produce anything bad related to their brand. That's why they haven't done lots of Magic licensing. So I can imagine that Fox goes, here's our pitch, these are the people who want to be involved, and Wizards goes, there's no way we're doing this project. Yeah. They might shut it down themselves. So we'll see. It's far too early this is just rampant speculation. But the reason I bring up Magic is, if you look at Magic the Gathering, what these guys did, I think 5 years ago, is they said, we need to get more people playing this game. We need to get new players into this game. And they have a confidence they know why people buy their product. And they know how to create new people buying their product. They know how to create new Magic players. And the last 4 or 5 years, I think it's 4 years since they've implemented whatever it was that they did. But in these 4 years, every year, their sales have broken all their previous records for 4 years consecutively. And this is unprecedented. Like, companies don't get to do this. Magic is doing this every time, and you listen to them, and it's because they know what their audience wants. They know why their product works. And so they have a confidence that they can sit down, and when they make mistakes, they own up to them, and they fix those mistakes. There are a lot of people who hate on Magic, but they're wrong to, for the most part. And
I liked it back in the day. I liked Magic the Gathering. The only one I didn't really enjoy was Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's like it's a lot of things do that. But when it comes to the events, I was gonna say, at least some people I speak to often who don't read comics, it seems like the event is to entice them more than it is us. Or is it we just go, another event. It must be Tuesday. They look in and they're like, oh my god, Superman's now fighting Batman, or Superman's now fighting Wonder Woman, and the entire DC universe is fighting each other. This is going to change everything, like the advertisements say. I'm so sick of hearing that tagline. It'll change everything, and it changes fuck all.
Well, this is the thing. People get tired of it. If you look at the comics industry, the way people come in and out, it's very clear. You have people who get into this sort of habitual buying of comics, and then they've had one hype too many, and they give up. They've just had enough. They end up buying 10 times the number of comics for 1/10 of the story. I remember buying when they relaunched Superman with Joe Kelly, Joe Casey, Jeff Loeb, and the fourth person I forget. They relaunched him. And I remember buying, at the same time I was buying that, I was buying Detective Comics. And I bought 2 different Superman titles a month. So Superman came out once a week, and there were 4 titles, 1 for each week of the month, and I'm buying the Detective Comics once a month. And I remember when I stopped buying the Superman comics, I was buying 2 of them. I was buying Action Comics and like Superman, just the Superman one. I was buying those 2, and I realized I was getting a half of a story. And I was buying Detective Comics, and I was getting a full story every issue. And I just looked at it and went like, there's just no point to this. You're asking me to buy 4 different titles, all with different creative teams, all with different things, but I have to buy all 4 to keep up with it, or not. And so
it can get worse.
Huh? Sorry?
I said, and it can get much worse with events.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Like what you were saying, I did the same thing with Supergirl. I was buying the Supergirl comics during the reboot before 52, when they brought her into the new universe and stuff. And basically, with that, suddenly when we got like that, what the hell is it called now? With the big arc with all the Kryptonians are now back. Suddenly, in order to read the whole story, you had to buy Supergirl. You then had to buy Superman. You then had to buy Action Comics, Man of Steel, Superman, a Supergirl crossover comic that they launched for it, and the actual events comic all at once. It's like, fuck off.
Well, that's the thing. They do that. People buy it. They do it once, twice, and then they go, I've had enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And they give up. And then they don't come back. And the reason that the comics audience is shrinking, even despite all these movies, as far as I know, it's still shrinking. The reason is because these don't entice new people to come back in. The new people come back in and then they leave. Sorry, people leave and they don't come back generally. Like, there's a diminishing returns. In Magic, it's very interesting if you take a look at how Magic did it versus how comics do it. It's because Magic has a similar community. They get really in deep, really tight, really deep into the Magic world, and then they leave. I left Magic, for example, from Tempest till Scars of Mirrodin. So I don't know, it's 10 years or something. I wasn't playing Magic at all, and then now I'm back into it again, and I'm buying all these boosters and things, and I'm totally in love with it again. But apparently this is a very common thing. This is how Magic players work. So how come they keep getting them back? And why do they leave in the first place? And people leave for a number of reasons, but I would guess the most important one is money. That it's simply too expensive, Magic. People get families and they have to cut back on it. But what they've discovered is that if you make it so that people feel they have to buy all your products to keep up, they stop. People stop going to tournaments for Magic, for example, because it gets too expensive to get the right deck. But what they don't stop doing is they don't stop wanting to play the game. And if they get back into it, like Magic now, they produce all these products where they're like self-contained, you buy a deck and it's ready to play. Or you buy two decks that are ready to play against each other. You don't have to buy boosters. You can buy full working decks that are fun. And they have all these different versions of them. People are able to come in, spend a little money, get involved, and if they want to get further into like getting all these big rare cards, they can, but they don't feel they have to. You don't feel like they put like when they do this mistake, and they recently made this mistake. They put a really chase card in a pre-constructed deck, which caused all these decks to sell out and their prices skyrocketed, and everyone got very, very upset. And they went, "Don't worry, we're reprinting them. It was a mistake." They realize it's a mistake. They're going to have to reevaluate how they do that later. But the thing is, if it was run by the comics world would actively put those cards into everything they could in order for you to have to buy everything.
Variant covers.
Yeah, exactly. It's how other card games have made this mistake. They make these really rare promotional cards that you can only get in certain areas, but they're actually relevant to the gameplay. And so people can't keep up with the game unless they spend an enormous amount of money to get that card. Whereas in Magic, they don't do that. If there's a card with a unique gameplay, it's available in always the basic thing, and everyone has access to it. The only time they do really hard to get promos are alternate art things and so forth. So it's for collectors, it's not for the game player, the casual player. And so when you look at these two, you start to realize, like, Magic knows how to cultivate its audience, knows why its audience leaves, is okay. This is the amazing thing. Magic is fine if you stop playing Magic, because they know it's fine. You're going to do that, but you'll come back, and we want to make sure that it's easy for you to come back in when you want to. And we don't want to push you away. We understand that there'll be external factors in your life that will stop you from being able to buy our product. But in comics, that's not how they think. In comics, they don't know why the audience is there, so they keep trying to get them to buy everything. So if a title is flagging, let's do a crossover thing here. And yeah, that works. That raises the title's sales for that month. Then it stops working. And then the title drops back down again. Let's get this guy to do the covers. Yeah, but people don't care about what's inside. They just want the cover. On and on it goes. So these events are part of that. And it's a problem because there's no reason for the events to be bad. That's the thing. There's no reason. The events, if you think about it, an event series is basically a hyped up series, a hyped up Avengers story. That's all it is. All of these series could be done as the Avengers or the Justice League. They don't need to be these events. All they are is hyped up. But the problem is, so that if you can have a good Justice League story, then you can have a good event. So why are they? I mean, Justice League Unlimited is basically an event in TV land. That's all it is, right? It's just one enormous event. Young Justice is just an event. That's all it is, that cartoon. And they're great. So why is it that the comics can't do it?
I think that's because the comics also, like every month or every couple of weeks or however long it is, release an Avengers one and stuff. So when they do something as big as the event, they need to raise the stakes. And the only way you can raise the stakes is having the Avengers now suddenly not be enough for this next bad guy. Now you have to start including like the X-Men and Fantastic Four and stuff like that.
Exactly. The event has to top the previous event. And so you get into this bizarre situation where you are turning the stakes more and more abstract and they make less and less sense and you can't go anywhere. And it's competing with itself. So the events that Marvel are making compete with the events DC are making, but they also compete with Avengers, Fantastic Four, and all the others. And so you have this competition between everything. So to solve the competition, what do? They buy them all together. But now you have to buy all of these comics in order to get it. So the limited series isn't really understandable on its own. It's not readable. You have to read everything else around it and all this stuff. And as I say, it's such an event. It's such a taxing, big budget type thing. You need to draw so much. Why do you think Infinite Crisis got cut? Well, because they went, oh, you know what, Morrison doesn't know what he's doing? No, but because Morrison probably wrote something that would require 3 months to draw, and they're already releasing issue 3, and there's no way they can get it done in time, so they cut it down. Is that Morrison's fault? Is it the editor's fault? Is it the scheduling's fault? It doesn't matter whose fault it is. That's why you have all these problems, because the events are spiraling sort of out of control of the capacities by people to do them, by the nature of they aren't planning them out effectively.
That's something they should do. They should plan them out for, say, like 2 years. And if you know, okay, in 2 years, this is the event we're going for, this is where it's going, you could get the event issues actually being drawn and stuff while all the other stuff's coming out, so you've got it ready.
But again, that can't work. And the reason that can't work is they don't know where they will be in 2 years. Yeah. Comics don't think that far ahead.
Which is a shame.
It's a shame, but it's part of how the model works. They only work month by month. You look at the movies, they can do it, right? They can plan that far ahead because it takes 3 years to make a movie, so you have to think 3 years ahead. But a comic, you think 1 month ahead, maybe 6 months ahead. In fact, it seems writing contracts, when they do them, it's only 6 months. You get given 6 issues to do something, and that's it. So then you only know what you're doing for that 6 issues. Then you have to think about the next 6 issues as you're writing that or afterwards. You can't plan in advance. You won't get that kind of contract. So the problem is they're trying to do long form storytelling, but with a short term schedule. Well, it's not going to work. You need to have a long-form schedule in order to fit the long-form storytelling. But it's really hard to do this. I mean, this is the thing. People think, why can't they do these events? Because they're crap. It's like, no, it's really hard. It's really hard. These guys it's not that they're not trying to do good stuff. They're trying really hard. But they haven't got an infrastructure, I think. A creative infrastructure that allows them to produce the work that they want to produce. I mean, let's look at it this way. Take a writer who is not doing good work at the moment. Say someone like Brian Michael Bendis, right? He's not doing particularly good work. Is it because he's a bad writer and he's lost it and he's sold out? Well, that's a deep psychoanalytical thing that you could do to someone, and I don't know him well enough, so it would be wrong of me to think that. But you could look at it as just a matter of time. Say this guy, when he's running at the top of his game, right? He's been given a 6-issue storyline, right? He's pitched a 6-issue storyline. He's going to write the 6-issue storyline. He's got 6 issues. So in 6 issues, how many scenes are you going to have? Say 10 scenes a comic, 60 scenes in total? Okay, maybe 5 scenes, whatever. Say 5 scenes per comic. Okay, 30 scenes total. Probably 1 major reversal each issue, right? So maybe 6 acts. Okay, fine. To get your best work, you have to write 10 times the material, because you're not going to be brilliant every time. You only be brilliant like 1 out of 10 times. Even the best writers are brilliant only 1 in 10 times. So that means for every issue, he has to write 50 scenes. He can't, and if he's and he has to earn his living. He has a family. He has a house. He has all these things. He has to earn his living. He can't earn his living from 1 comic. He has to write multiple comics. So before you know it, the energy that he would spend trying to get, say, of his 5 scenes, say 2 or 3 of them are his best work, right? All the energy that he would put into that, well, he has to put that into generating new stories for new issues, for new things, and before you know it, he simply just doesn't have the time to produce his best work. Yep. And this is where you desperately need an editor to come in and help, to chap away a lot of the bad decisions in order to get you to your best ones. You should be able to tell, for example, you want an editor to come up to you and say, look, this is a secret invasion. Why are they invading Manhattan in garish costumes? This doesn't make any sense. If you're going to do the Age of Ultron, for example, I remember when I read the Age of Ultron, I'm like, if he had given me this pitch, I'd have fixed it in that pitch, because it doesn't work. There's no point to Ultron being in this story. There's a time travel story going on. You don't need 5 issues to set this up, and so on, right? When Bendis goes like, I'm going to have 5 issues setting up the time travel story, all he's done is increased his workload 5 times because he has to write the same beat 5 times in a row. He has to do 5 issues when there's only 1 issue worth of story there, and so on. And so you want editors to come in and help these people hit their deadlines at the best possible quality. So you need an infrastructure like that, and part of that is scheduling. Part of that is being able to do, make sure that they're on a timeline that works. So the editors really need to help these writers get into these positions, not because the writers can't do it, but because the writers simply do not have that kind of luxury. They don't have the resources to be able to let their own sort of natural talent come to the fore by itself. They just don't have the time. And it's not like, I mean, there are very few people who could do it. Alan Moore, probably, I think, his best work was when he was doing the ABC universe. He was doing like 5 series at the same time, all of them wildly different. Remember? And yeah, he did doing Promethea, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Tom Strong, Tomorrow Stories, and Top 10. All brilliant, unique, individual stuff. He was writing them simultaneously. Well, why? Well, because he's Alan Moore, right? He's probably the greatest comic writer ever, I would think. But he also has been honing his craft for 25 years. Like, that's why he's able to do it, because he's one of those people that can. Not everyone can do this, and editors are helpful. And there are times, I think, even in his ABC line, and particularly now, Alan Moore has lost his way a bit because he doesn't have an editor to help him through make these decisions, and he's not making the decisions with that kind of sense. Like, he's writing these comics, and it's like there's no audience for this anymore.
Yeah.
No, who's gonna, like, the audience is tiny for this, and maybe that audience likes it, but it's kind of weird for him to then blame people for not following him when he's actively making stuff that's alienating.
Yeah, with Alan Moore, for me, it's a case of he did a load of good issues at one point. He did a load of good comics like Watchmen and Killing Joke and stuff like that. But then, after a certain point, it's like he suddenly, people loved him so much, he's believed his own hype. Like, he now believes he can't do no wrong, and that's a dangerous place to be in.
Oh, actually, I think it's worse. I don't think he is thinking that. I think he doesn't want a mainstream audience. And so he's actively putting off as many people as he can. Because he wants a very loyal, small audience. And I don't think that's very good. I think people who lose their way, someone like J. Michael Straczynski would be of the guys that you're talking about. I say this because I haven't met these people. I don't know these people. So maybe what I'm saying is horribly unfair. But judging from the way that, all I do is I look at the work and then I try to understand what would drive a writer to write what they've written. And when you look at something like the Dr. Manhattan series J. Michael Straczynski wrote, it is written in a way that belies someone who will not listen to anyone else's suggestions. And he's not second-guessing himself. The reason I say this, and this is the only reason, is... Did you read the Dr. Manhattan series?
I don't think I did.
Okay, I'm just going to give you the basic premise. Dr. Manhattan goes back along his timeline and observes himself in the accident. But by observing it, he accidentally changes it, and he never goes into he never becomes Dr. Manhattan. And then and that makes the world explode in nuclear war. So in order to stop the nuclear war, he goes back and puts himself, in other words, Dr. Manhattan creates himself. He's the reason why he's in the accident, right?
Yep.
The reason I say this is an example of someone who is not editing himself and not letting anyone else edit him is because it is the same idea he has used for the past, I don't know how many years. He did it with Spider-Man. The spider didn't bite him by accident. It was a totem thing, an animal totem.
God.
Right?
I remember, wasn't it Spider-Man the Other, or whatever it was called?
No, it was before the other. It was with this character Ezekiel and Moore. And then Doctor Strange. He did a Strange series with Brandon Peterson. And what did he do? He went back and said the accident that crippled Stephen Strange was not an accident. Actually, it was someone trying to do this so he would become the Sorcerer Supreme. His best friend did it instead. Fantastic Four. Well, the cosmic radiation that turned them into transport wasn't an accident. It was an alien trying to communicate with humans. And what you realize is this is his MO. He goes back and says the accident isn't an accident, there's an agent behind it. That there was an agency and a purpose to you becoming this character. And if you've done it 3 or 4 times to totally different characters, and then you do it again to Dr. Manhattan, what that tells you is you're not writing a Dr. Manhattan story. You are just copy and pasting the same thing again and again and again. And that tells me you're not editing yourself.
And also,
to edit yourself, you have to sit back and go, what am I doing? And he's not thinking like that. And anyone else who would say anything, you wouldn't listen to.
Yeah, and also not every character needs that. Like Fantastic Four, maybe, but like the stuff with Spider-Man, like you said, maybe the one before the other. I remember it with the totems and stuff, and it's like that kind of goes against it because Peter's thing is he's just an everyday kid that happened to get bit by the spider, and then who he is inside makes him choose to use this accident for good. Now saying it's destiny kind of takes that away.
Well, it gets worse with Manhattan because it destroys the Manhattan character. Dr. Manhattan is the character who believes in determinism. He's an absolute determinist. That's the whole point of the character. When he becomes Manhattan, he becomes a total determinist. Basically, that character is an atheist who's desperately searching for meaning in life. And at the end of Watchmen, he finds it. Remember?
Yep.
And he's a total atheistic determinist. So to have Dr. Manhattan going back and ascribing agency and free will to his creation, while at the same time using the Schrodinger's paradox, where you have quantum indeterminism, is to totally and utterly misunderstand the character.
Yep.
But anyway, I mean, this is not really about events. It's more about, like just talking about why I'm not enjoying Straczynski anymore.
It kind of tied into the events, but
well, we got there, I suppose, organically. But the point is, like, I'm trying to explain why we get these events, and it's not because writers are evil, stupid people who don't care. You do get some writers who can't find themselves; they won't listen to anyone editing them anymore. You get some writers who actively are trying to put away a large section of their audience. But then you also get people who are desperately trying hard and simply either don't have the time or don't have the talent. It's really hard. Like I don't get angry in the sense with Straczynski or Alan Moore, and I go, well, this isn't like when I read the Alan Moore Nemo story where Nemo's daughter goes to the Antarctic. I was really looking forward to that, and I read it, and it was just unreadable.
Is that a spin-off of Finding Nemo?
No, it's. If only.
Alan Moore wrote Finding Nemo. That'd be awesome. Alan Moore writes a Finding Nemo comic.
Yeah, because I have a lot of respect for Straczynski. He wrote Babylon 5, which is one of my absolute favourite series of all time. Alan Moore, I think, is a magnificent writer, and I think I also seem to think, based on how he speaks, I think he's a good person. So, and I'm sure Straczynski is as well. So, and Bendis, I think, has real talent because when I go back and reread his beginning Ultimate Spider-Man, there is a joy to them that cannot be. Bless you. A joy to them that simply cannot be ignored. Yep. So I'm not trying to bash them in order to make myself feel good. I'm trying to explain why these writers, who we do like, I mean, the reason we know their names is because we read their work, because we really liked their work. And now it's not working as well. And it's the same with these events. We love these characters. We love these writers. Then they get together, they produce this event, and it doesn't work. And it's not that it doesn't work once. You go, okay, it was an aberration. No, it doesn't work every time. It's like a repeated experiment. Yeah. Every time they get the best guys together, do an event, and the event is almost always, I mean, as I say, the only event I can remember reading that I enjoyed was the Infinity Gauntlet. For you, it's the Secret War. That's 2. They're both 20 years old.
Which was since we did favourite one, what was your least favourite event that you've read?
I would have to guess, to be honest, I think pretty much all of them are of an equal antipathy for me. I can't tell the difference between all of them anymore. They're just none of them make any sense. Like all the problems I have with Civil War, I could easily say there's problems in the Siege or Avengers Disassembled. Like they're all just. And this will sound rude. I don't mean it to be, but it is. But it will sound rude. They're just creatively bankrupt. There's nothing to them. They're not intelligent. There's a kernel of an idea behind them, and they haven't developed it at all, and no one has tried to develop it. They've just tried to get it out in time.
I'll say my worst one would be...
Yeah.
You mentioned my worst one. My worst one would be Civil War.
Yeah.
Because Civil War, when it started, that idea was fucking genius. Of, at last, people have finally woke up and realised, look, superheroes do this much damage. Let's register them. And it was cool.
Yes.
And then you had the whole whose side are you on? And then it went downhill fast because it was meant to be, you were supposed to be able to relate to both sides equally.
Absolutely, yes.
And then you have Iron Man, you have
Bullseye and everyone,
Yeah, and you have like Iron Man's side use villains, and Iron Man then turns around and says the thing of, oh yeah, I know having Peter Parker unmasked will destroy him, but it's worth it because it helps my cause. It's like, no, you're a villain. You're a villain when you do that.
Iron Man completely loses it.
And the whole clone of Thor.
He hires all these supervillains to hunt down people like Spider-Man, and then he puts those people in the negative zone, right? In a prison in the negative zone, and you're just sitting there going like, hold on, if you have a prison in the negative zone, why isn't Doctor Doom in it? This doesn't make sense. Furthermore, you know when I say like they don't have the time and it's creatively bankrupt? This is what I mean. I don't say this just because I want to get on my high horse and insult people who are writing comics that that I want to write or whatever. It's not. I'm not saying this out of like a bit of jealousy. Like some fanboys may do that, but that's not why I'm saying it.
No, we say this because we generally enjoy comics, and therefore if something annoys us, it's because, like with Civil War annoying me, it's because it started off so fucking great, and then by like the midpoint, it all went straight downhill, and they just wasted every bit of potential. I said, no, this had the potential to be one of the greatest stories you've ever written, and you quickly turned it into the worst.
Well, this is the thing, it's that potential, because when I say it's bankrupt, what I mean is they have done nothing to really consider what they're doing. For example, I remember, I think issue 2 or issue 1 had just come out, and I went up on the comic board and I put up like a big essay on why this series has already failed. And I read the rest of the series, and I was just proven right every step of the way. And this is why when I say these things, I have a bit of conviction behind them. It's not because I'm just imagining things. It's because I've sat down and given this some proper critical thought and gone, here's what you were trying to do. Like, put my script doctor hat on. This is what you're trying to do, and here's how you failed. And you didn't fail in this way. You failed in what you were trying to do. I'm judging it by that standard of what they were doing. So Civil War, for example, if you have an environment where you're going to say these characters are going to create a prison to put non-registered superheroes in, vigilantes in, this is fine, okay? But if you have these resources, why are they not used on worse villains?
Yeah, the villains are kept in regular prison where they can escape on the show every week.
Absolutely. Now, you could make a very good point of this in the comic, for example. You could make the point that people are treated worse if they do drugs, right? In real life, there's mandatory minimums on certain drugs. You get put in like, for example, if you're caught with a certain amount of like crack cocaine, you get a more severe punishment than if you raped someone to death, right?
Yeah, so that also comes into the ideals of the place you are. For example, we mentioned this in one of our other podcasts before now. Of take a game like Call of Duty. Sure. It's massively praised and stuff like that in the US and bought and stuff, and it involves people getting guns and shooting the holy crap out of each other. But when you have something else where it's like a slightly bit of sexiness to it, or even if it's artistic, and it's something like, boo, you're scarring our children. It's like, no, you can't pick and choose morals, people.
Well, this is the thing. Like we have this sort of thing where we don't treat everything equally all the time, right? Because we're not, that's how human beings are. But here's the thing. So you could make a point in the comic. You could say the reason that we're clamping down on vigilantes more is because that's the way the public opinion is turning. And so Iron Man you could have a thing where Iron Man's making the point that Spider-Man technically is more dangerous than Bullseye, right? You could have, think about it. Imagine if Iron Man actually acted in a way that consistently made the point, and it was a compelling enough a point because you did your research, right? That Iron Man genuinely believes a masked vigilante is more dangerous than, the Trapster or Bullseye, right? Imagine if he made that point. that would bring back that interesting political argument that the series is supposed to be about. But that's not what they do. They just have the characters act in an inconsistent way, and inconsistently with their world. Here's another step where they made this mistake, and they made this mistake so much it was unbelievable. If America passes a law that says superheroes in America must register, this has no effect on anyone else in the world. It makes no earthly sense. And there's no reason at all for Namor to be upset about this. He's not an American citizen. He is a head of state. He's a king of Atlantis. Americans passing laws doesn't matter to him at all. Why is Namor even interested? He doesn't care, right? It just doesn't make any sense.
It goes into the whole action movie territory of America is the kings of the world and their law matters everywhere.
but it gets even stupider. Black Bolt. If you remember Black Bolt, he's the king of the Inhumans. He got upset with this idea of them doing registration. The problem with Black Bolt being upset is the Inhuman Society, of which he is king, is a meritocracy. The whole point of it is, when you're 13, you're exposed to the Terrigen Mists, they mutate you, and your entire purpose in the society is dependent on how you mutated to the Terrigen Mists. So if anything, he'd be like, of course you should be registering superheroes. In fact, you should be making sure that they get the proper jobs for their powers. I will help you set up an infrastructure. I'll send an Inhuman ambassador to help you sort this out.
I would also argue, aren't most of them already technically have to be registered, kind of, due to the fact when they went to Avengers, they've worked with S.H.I.E.L.D. on multiple occasions, therefore they have to register who they are in order to get permission onto S.H.I.E.L.D., which includes Spider-Man and Captain America and stuff.
Right, depending on which version of Avengers they're doing. And then you have the thing of, well, why? The X-Men, of course, are going to be deadly opposed to this. Why? Because of the Days of Future Past scenario. They know they're one step away from Sentinels.
See,
right?
I will disagree with you on one thing with that.
Go on.
I absolutely loved the X-Men response in Civil War, where they're coming up to them and they're being like, are you going to get involved in this? And they're like, no, it's about time you guys dealt with what we had to deal with, and basically, you didn't help us, so we're not helping you. Fuck yourselves, and just walked off. I like that.
What I wanted just to make clear on is, I'm not like bad-mouthing the writers and these people involved and saying the reason it doesn't work is because they're too stupid and they can't get it or anything like that, because it is genuinely difficult. Like, it's not hard to, in hindsight, say, you know what, it makes more sense if Black Bolt acts this way and not that way, and then go, you should do something with that and walk away. That's not that hard to do, really. And that's what you want actually editors to be doing. But to actually sit down and do it is very difficult, particularly if you're not writing multiple stories. It's just hard to do. But here's the reason that it's a particular problem with events. And I say this in the hopes that, you know, if someone somewhere is like listening to this and thinking about events, this is how the reason why they keep failing, no matter who you get involved and why they don't work. And it's this. When they do these events, right, they are telling us it's going to be this long, it's going to be this broad, it's going to incorporate this many characters, this many franchises, whatever. It's going to be this deep. And as a result, the expectations are enormous. And they start giving you more and more expectations. This is going to change everything, right? And you create these expectations you are incapable of meeting. Because you haven't got the time, you haven't got the quality, you haven't got the quality control, rather. You haven't got these things in place that will allow you to meet those expectations. If you look, for example, when someone does a very small little indie comic, people don't get upset about it like they do with these events. Why? Because the comic is better written? Maybe a little bit, but it's to do mainly because the expectations of the work is so low. Not because we don't expect anything good from it. It's just literally, it's small, right? We expect it to be good, but in relation, if someone gives you a 10-page mini comic, you don't expect it to have the effect that a 200-page comic tied into, like, I don't know what, 400 other pages of comic book material from how many different series that takes 6 months to play out? Like,
Yep.
when someone gives you that, you expect that to be a big deal. When you say, here's this Avengers movie, people expect a lot out of it, right? It had 5 films building it up. It has all these actors, all this stuff. And, good for Marvel. For the most part, it paid off what people were expecting.
Yeah.
And you could argue maybe I expected a little too much from it, but I think it wasn't that great. But it was fine. But I didn't walk away from the Avengers going like, well, they cheated me. But when you come out of an event like Civil War or Secret Invasion, or Crisis of Infinite Earths or whatever it was, when you walk out of these things, people, you look at the fan community, so many people, the people who are upset about it, they're not just bitter and jealous like some people who complain about the Avengers maybe or whatever. When they complain about films, there's a bitter and jealousy that may be reasonable and may be unreasonable, whatever. But with
I'm
comics,
really jealous of Michael Bay.
Right. So some people are very jealous when you look at their comments and you go like, this is jealousy talking, it's not really a proper critique. But when you look at, say, the fan base, the fan community of events, it's not jealousy, it's frustration, it's dissatisfaction, it's this sort of, why did you spend so much time building this up? It didn't go anywhere, and so on. And so even if they're wrong in their critiques, there's this total sense of you built something up, you didn't pay it off. And that's why they keep failing. It's because they set a bar too high that they cannot reach. If they were more modest, then they would actually be okay. This is why people don't complain about Avengers the comic or Justice League the comic. They complain about the event, not the comic. But the comics, like the Justice League comic, is probably as well written as any of the recent events that have come out. It's not particularly well written either. So why is it... Sorry.
Another reason is they're lying to you.
Well, this is part of expectation. You see, they're not lying.
No,
I mean, this is going to change everything, but they can't change everything, and so it feels like they're lying, right?
Oh, but I don't just mean that. I mean, like, when they say they're going to change everything, and then essentially for the first 2 to 6 months after the event, the status quo's changed, then just almost on cue, they managed to turn it back to the status quo to do another event to change it back. It's like, if they kept some of the changes, people wouldn't be annoyed because that event actually changed something.
But and now you see, that's what I mean. This is the whole paradoxical situation they find themselves in. They create these enormous expectations which they can't fulfill, right? But if they didn't give you these expectations, it wouldn't be an event. And so therefore, the comics industry is built on this premise of we have to create stories that we cannot reasonably actually produce. We have to produce events, but we do not have the infrastructure in order to actively fulfill them the way that we promised them. And every year, we have to up our promises.
And I would ask,
yes,
how long do you have left before we wrap it up completely?
I don't know, 5-10 minutes?
Okay, I was going to make one little thing to do with events I thought we should address.
Oh.
What do you feel about these self-contained series events? Because I was thinking about this recently, and I think, ironically, DC does these better, only because take like Batman.
Yes.
In Gotham, you then have Batman. It can then tie easily to Nightwing, Batwoman, and all these other comics in the same place, and it makes logical sense. Whereas when Spider-Man does it, and then suddenly you get like Black Cat returning and stuff, because they don't have their own comics, it doesn't have the same weight behind it. I'm not sure if that's a thing or not.
That sounds totally reasonable to me. Again, it's that thing. These events, by definition, have to promise enormous stakes, enormous ramifications to multiple franchises. And if you can meet that, expectation, then the event will not just be a success financially, but people will actually enjoy it and look fondly on it and will want more of the same in a way that is... when I talk about these things, I'm not talking about what will sell this summer. because that stuff you can merchandise your way into that. I'm talking about the kind of comics where I look at my comic rack and there's some comics I don't ever want to give away. I want to reread because they're so well written, as opposed to comics where I go, man, what was I thinking when I used to like this? Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
You want comics that age well.
Yeah. It's like, my point with that as well was, in my opinion, and this might just be my opinion, some of the smaller events are better than the bigger ones. The ones like I mentioned, like the Batman family events, for example.
Absolutely.
Night of the Owls. I actually enjoyed that. It introduced a new villain group. It did it well. Yes. It affected stuff. I was like, this is cool. I've got that with my new 52 stuff, and I was like, I kind of like this.
But you know James from the comic board, right?
Yes.
And he co-wrote it and stuff. I saw him in New York with Luis, and I was telling him, the Court of the Owls, ignoring the zombie stuff, which I thought was a big mistake, the idea of a secret cabal inside Gotham City, and it's owl-themed, no joke, is one of the finest Batman villain creations I've ever read. It is a superb idea.
Oh, you like Night of the Owls?
I didn't like the story. There was a lot about the execution I didn't like. But that's not what I'm getting to.
Oh.
The idea that he invented a new villain that, in my opinion, if people should realize how good the Court of Owls is. When I see a new Batman adaptation, I want the Court of Owls to be as important, as a bigger part of it as Bane and Joker. It is a superb villain. And the fact that I didn't even like their premiere story that they debuted in, there were lots of things about it I didn't like, but I thought this Court of Owls is magnificent. To me, I take my hat off because that is so hard to do, and they actually did it. And so, bravo to them. That's not me being trying to knock them down. I'm trying to explain how good just that basic idea is. Like, so few people come up with truly brilliant villains.
Yeah, brilliant villains. And another thing with that is they were unique. They were unique enough and new that it was cool. Whereas you went over to, say, on the flip side when they relaunched Amazing Spider-Man, and most of the new villains they created, like one of them got nicknamed the Red Goblin because he looked like the Green Goblin but red on a glider, and it's like,
yes.
What?
Here's the thing. I commend their attempts at trying to come up with new villains. Whether or not the villains failed or not is, to me, it's a shame. But at least they tried. They didn't rely too much on other villains.
Yeah.
But when they come up with a new villain, to me, that's the best thing. So, but anyway, I think the reason, though, that these Batman things, for example, would be much more successful than they have been, you could argue, well, the writing is better. Okay, fine, let's say the writing is better. But let's say it's not. Let's say the writing is, let's be unfair or whatever, and just go, okay, the writing for Court of Owls is as good as Civil War. Why would it would still be, I think, a lot more entertaining. Why? Because your expectations of how far this event is supposed to go. As you say, it's all tightly knit in a very small pocket part of the DC universe. They don't have to go as far as, say, Secret Invasion does. So already, the product that they're producing, it's built into it that there's a sense that they could actually satisfy their audience with what they're doing. But when you get to Secret Invasion, there's so many reasons they can't do it. So what I would suggest, if I had any kind of pull to the Marvel or DC, is I say, look, if you want to do these events, that's fine, but you have to really understand what you're trying to do here, and you need to match the expectations you're building up, or drop those expectations down. You can't promise something that you will never actually do, because if you keep doing that, it's like what happened with Lost, or Galactica, or Heroes. All these shows did the same thing. They promised big, big things. They never paid them off. And people got disheartened, and you can just see, like, the passage of how people, as soon as they start to realize we're not going to get the payoff, they give up and they never go back because you betrayed them. This is why you lied to me, you betrayed me.
Yeah, you end up getting that feeling after each event of you're Charlie Brown trying to kick the football, and every time they pull it away.
Exactly, and the problem is it's their own fault. They are trapped in it, and if they seriously, I'm not trying to, I don't want to like. I think it's when you're doing podcasts or whatever, and you're talking in public and stuff, you have to be a little more responsible than if you're just ranting to your friend on Messenger or on a forum somewhere, because it's possible some of these people might hear this, and you don't want to just insult them. And to be fair, a lot of these people stop listening because of how horribly they're insulted by their fans.
Although, if someone from the comic book industry is listening to this right now, fuck you, Loeb.
That's exactly what I was advocating. Well done. But like, it's worth pointing out that because they don't know what their audience wants, they overcompensate by creating too high an expectation in their audience, and then they never pay it off, and they have to keep going, okay, well, we didn't pay off this one, but the next one really will pay it off. And they keep doing that. And once the audience cottons on that, you know what, you're never going to pay this off, they leave, they never come back. And what they need to do is, like, one of these two companies, whichever one wants to do it, needs to stop trying to top themselves and the other one. And they need to sit back and go, look, we're going to have one event. We're going to treat this like a movie. We're going to have one event like every 2 years. And we're going to spend those 2 years building up to this event or something. Or if we're going to have an event every year, that's fine. But then we've got to work out what these events are going to be. We need to know what, if we have like a 5-year plan, we need to know what year 4 is before we start doing year 1. We need a forward-thinking process and time like that. So if I were in charge of Marvel or DC, what I would do is I'd say, right, the people who are working now, just keep doing it. Keep the machine going. And then I would get a second group of people whose sole purpose is to do forward planning. They're not supposed to write individual issues. They're supposed to do forward planning for these big events, and only for the big events. And then you leave the individual titles to themselves. You give editors their own fiefdoms and that kind of thing. You don't force other writers to change their comics midway point. And then you slowly build in a forward-thinking process that allows you to manage your expectations a bit better. Because one of the key genres, there's different types of genre, right? You have genres of content, genres of style. One type of genre is a genre of duration. Depending on how long something is, people match their expectations to it. They have very different expectations for something that's 10 minutes long versus something that's 3 hours long. And if you're going to tell people, here's a series.
So it's on a scale of Cartoon Network mini cartoon to Peter Jackson.
Exactly, right? You have this enormous scale, right? But it's true. And if you think about it, when you go to see the Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings, your expectation is much different than if you go to see a little mini cartoon in terms of what you expect and how satisfied you're going to be and so on. And if you don't realize those kind of things that you're giving your audience, it's going to be very hard. You're going to just be lucky if you meet them. Yep. But if you stop and go, no, we're going to actively try and work out what the audience expects and give it to them properly, the audience will keep coming back again and again. They'll be so happy. Or I honestly think that if the comic book industry, because they have to produce a certain amount of work within a year, and it's like clockwork, and they produce it every year, the exact same thing. If Marvel and DC really took a look at how Wizards of the Coast produced Magic the Gathering and how they've totally revolutionized the way they do things and cultivated a whole brand new audience in a way that they never had before, I think they would learn so much, because so much of the design principles are the same. And I would love us to have really good events, but right now it seems the events are terrible, and I think it's just because they don't know why people want them, and they don't know what they're promising them.
And I could agree with that. And if you have any thoughts on events or any comments about what we've said here, feel free to leave them below. But I think it's time to take this out.
Yes.
I was your host, Chriz, a.k.a. The Mole, joined by the Nexus of the World Bass.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can join me again in the future. This was fun.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for having me on. It was great to talk to you. It's always good to hear you.
My pleasure. And see ya.
Bye.